Okay, it's time. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. Let me welcome you if you're new. Let me say thanks if you're a returning listener. How's everybody doing? I am still in Japan, and the same thing that happened last time happened again this time, which is that I always think I'm going to get all this stuff done while I'm here, and I forget how taxing the job is. Like, I'm teaching pretty extensive hours, 2-3 hour sessions a day, 8 out of the 10 days I'm here. So I've got 2 days left, and I don't have a lot of bandwidth left after I'm done teaching, And, I've been feeling a little bit of some anxiety, I think, just about going back home. I got a lot of responsibilities waiting for me there, and I've been sort of like away from it. You know how you get away from your life when you leave? But my life's still there, still waiting for me. And the other thing is, at the end of the last podcast outro, I sort of expressed this hope that there was going to be some kind of course correction in America. And I haven't been paying any attention to the news over the last few days, but just before hitting record, I checked in with the news, and that was probably a bad idea, but it totally freaked me out. I can't believe it. It just seems like all the sane people who are supposed to be protecting us are getting fired, and what the fuck's going on? I mean, I don't know. I don't really want to get into politics, but I don't know about anybody else. It just seems to me that I'm really wondering whether our institutions are going to hold, and if we're really seeing some kind of real collapse or something. I mean, it doesn't feel good. I mean, maybe that course correction's still coming, but it feels like things are going to get a lot worse before they get better, and that's definitely freaking me out a little bit. I got to admit it. But there's nowhere to go with that. There's nothing to say about that other than I'm freaked out. And I want to bring this podcast episode to you this week because we have a really interesting talk with Anna Forrest and her partner, Jose Calarco. And it was definitely an interesting turn of events that brought about this conversation. I sent an email to a totally stock address, like info@forrestyoga.com, I don't know how many months ago, a long while ago, and never heard anything about it. And then out of nowhere, I got an email from an assistant person asking some questions, saying that Anna was considering coming on. I was super excited. I took a couple classes with Anna Forrest way back when, and we talk about that some. And I know some people who studied closely with her. I just have always found her an intriguing figure, somewhat mysterious. And I have to say, while we certainly get to reveal some of that mystery, there's still a lot of mystery left after talking to her. You'll get to hear. She's quite a person. And the other thing that happened was, in my exchange with this assistant person, first of all, they wanted to know what I was going to ask. And sometimes that happens. People are like, can you send me some questions? And I always do the same thing. I don't like to write out questions, but if somebody is feeling a little apprehensive, I want to put them at ease, I will put together a few bullet points, just some ideas that off the top of my head, that I would want to talk to this person about, So I put together a few bullet points like that. And then I heard back from the assistant, said, oh, these are great. Anna's going to come on. But informing me that her partner, Jose Calarco, would be on the call with her, which wasn't a problem or anything, but definitely like changes stuff. I've done it a few times where I have like two people on, and it's certainly just a different experience for me rather than just trying to connect to one person. There's like this different dynamic, and I don't know who he was at all. And then it all kind of came together pretty on the fly, pretty quickly. So I didn't feel like I had like a super long time to like prepare. It just felt like, oh, okay, and now I'm talking to Anna Forrest and Jose. And ultimately, it was really quite engaging, and I think we go to some pretty interesting places. And I certainly learned a lot about her, and I'm super happy for you to get to listen to it today. Before we do, let me tell you that this episode of Yoga Talks is sponsored by Karmasoft. If you're not familiar with Karmasoft, it is a complete online yoga studio management solution. If you've been listening for a while, you've heard me talk about Karmasoft before. I had the founder, Rudy Senecal, on the podcast back in October 2017. It's one of my most favorite episodes. I encourage you to go listen to it. I used this software myself at my yoga center for 8 years before I closed down, and I can say firsthand that it is far superior to Mind Body Online. If you or anyone you know is a yoga, Pilates, or fitness center owner or manager or teacher, and you have to do the work of scheduling and class payments and accounting, all of it can be made much easier and more efficient by using Karmasoft. I cannot recommend it enough. Check out Karmasoft at karmasoftonline.com. Let me also drop my stuff here. I'm going to be in East Hartford, Connecticut, April 8th. I'm going to be in Fishkill, New York, April 14th. I'm going to be in Falls Church, Virginia, April 27th through 29th. I'm going to be in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, May 5th and 6th. And I am going to be starting teacher training of my own in Easton, Pennsylvania, May 12th. You can find out about all that stuff and listen to the archives of the podcast and read the blog and find my online yoga video offerings at jbrownyoga.com. If you're listening to this podcast and enjoying it and getting something from it, maybe you would give us a little support back. Go to a blog or podcast page, make a direct donation, or go to Apple Podcasts and iTunes and write a review and give us some stars. That stuff helps, and we'd sure appreciate it if you did that. Okay, I will touch base with you on the other side, tell you a little bit about what's going on going forward, as I like to do there. But let's go ahead now and listen to this conversation I had with Jose Calarco and Anna Forrest.
Hello.
Hello. Is this Jose?
Yes.
Hi.
Is that JB?
This is Jay Brown. Yes. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Hey.
Anna's here as well.
Cool. Hi, Anna.
Hello, Jay.
How are you guys today? It's morning for you, right?
It's morning in New Zealand, yeah.
It's 8 o'clock in the morning in New Zealand, and it's misty, raining, and very, very early start, and we're just getting our first cup of coffee in.
Oh, nice. I'm waking you up.
Hopefully, because we've just finished a series of workshops here, and after the workshops, there's always a period of exhaustion, and then we move to the next city, and we keep doing that this year to around 30 different cities. And last year we did approximately 30 cities around the world as well.
Yep, Spirit Eagle Tour is flapping around the world.
Wow. So you got, and you know, I know that you guys have been doing that for a while. I know Anna has been doing that for a long time. Do you guys, have you been a period that you remember where you just had to take a bunch of time off because you got burnt?
No, there hasn't been. Anna's been doing it for 40 years, and this Anna's been sold for 40 years, and this is we've done 3 full years together now, 15, 16, and 17, and this is the beginning of our 4th year as a partnership. So I came in like I did Anna's course about 4 years ago, and I thought, being an artistic director and performer, I thought, this is what this course needs. It was just critiquing, watching a teacher training from the outside, what an artistic director could do to a yoga course to make it more engaging for students by adding a whole bunch of things that I learned from my travels in the indigenous and shamanic field.
Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. I have a background in theater myself, so I know a little bit what you're referring to, and those skills, like stage manager skills, or even just the ability to kind of organize and direct a process from the outside, like even almost to like set it up so that Anna could do her work. Like teachers need that.
Oh, absolutely.
It's from the inside and from the outside, because Jose and I, we do the ceremonies and the songs together. So he's doing that aspect of working the magic there, but he orchestrated it from the outside too, as well as giving my business a wisdom that it hasn't had. Like he's able to pull my staff together so they work together more effectively. It's just been an amazing partnership.
Well, very cool. I know, as I talk to a lot of yoga teachers, and there's that work, like you say, of actually like conducting the ceremonies and doing those long hours sometimes in those retreats and those trainings, and just the intensity of the work, of the practice, and then there's also all the other stuff that needs to get done, like emails and everything. Yeah. And you kind of need help. You need help. So having a partnership, I could see how that really would help both sides of it.
Yeah, well, it definitely improved everything, because Anna was like was taking on everything herself, like the whole ceremony, teaching every posture, doing this. So she was running herself into exhaustion. So by me stepping in and teaching part of the class, doing the ceremony, and directing everything, and also doing 6 hours of email a day. Let's not forget that.
That's right. Someone's got to do it.
Yeah, it's just, so basically all the magic of what Forrest Yoga had is now, it's been elevated, and it's so much more, it's so much a better experience for the students, and it's added so much added value to the course, because we also work with indigenous and great musicians all over the world. In the Berlin training just recently, I had some of Berlin's finest musicians with me, and we were doing 45 minutes of ceremony, and we use the musicians the way we need them. Like, they don't just come and do whatever, or just jam for 10 minutes. Everything is carefully orchestrated, every single minute of the ceremony. So there's meditations and invocations. So there's both a yin and yang aspect in all the ceremonies.
Well, that's very cool. I'm very excited to talk to you guys, because one of the things, I don't know if you're familiar with this podcast, but one of the things that a lot of it's about for me is I've had this opportunity to talk to people who I feel like were real innovators at a crucial moment in the evolution of yoga, coming from like the East to the West. And for me, Anna's definitely one of those people. I remember taking a couple of classes with Anna at a place that I believe was yours. I believe it was Anna Forrest Yoga Studio in Los Angeles in the 90s, maybe 90s.
In Santa Monica.
What's that?
Santa Monica.
Yes, Santa Monica. You had a spot there, right? Like, it must have been 96 or 97. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Forrest Yoga Circle.
That's right. And I took a couple classes, and what stands out to me most is that at that time you already had a very, in my mind, fully realized like point of view and voice and like approach to practice. I remember like Power Dog, like you had stuff that was really unique to you and your practice. And that was at a time when it was still really like either Iyengar or Ashtanga or Shivananda. It was a really pivotal, like I talked with Sean Korn about this. She was another person who sort of early on spoke from like a very unique individual voice. And I'm very curious about how that happened for you. Like how did you end up having such a unique and individual voice at a time when that wasn't happening so much? Do you have an idea of that? Like, when were you first exposed to yoga?
It was around 1973 or 74.
And that was in Los Angeles?
That was back in the dark ages. No, that was in a little town in California called Glendora.
Okay.
And this girl at school who was not a friend, just someone I passed in the halls, came up to me and said, I have something you can't do. And I remember thinking, what the fuck? And I was a really tough kid then. I took out my cigarettes and I tapped it out and, did this whole like thing with my tobacco and lit it. And I said, that's impossible. And then I said, what is it? And she said, yoga. You want to come with me? And it was such a random, weird thing that I needed to go. And I did. And I couldn't do any of it. Because I was a horse trainer at the time, and I was a really heavy drinker, and I smoked, and I did whatever drugs I could get my hands on, and so I was quite toxic and stiff. I had a lot of injuries from the horse world. And so the whole yoga thing was really weird. And this young woman that talked to me into going with her, she sort of just drifted out of my life, and how I see it in retrospect is like the Sacred One's intervention, because I was definitely on a suicide track. And they just sort of geared this girl and steered her toward me, offered up the gauntlet. She threw down this gauntlet of a challenge, and then she just drifted out of my life, but I've never forgotten her name. It was Robin Smith. Because that was a pivotal time in my life, is going into this weird class of, to my perspective, really old women. There was all women in this class. They had to be at least 30 years old, because I was about 14.
You were 14 when this happened?
What?
I'm sorry, did you just say you were 14?
I was about 14. It was around 1973, 74, and the reason why I'm a little shaky on those years is because it's behind the drug and alcohol curtain, so it's a bit misty.
Wow, I'm sorry to jump in, but I mean, to be so in the mix of drugs and alcohol at 14, that's pretty crazy. I mean, like, how does that happen for you? You said you were in the horse world? Like, what was that?
I was riding and then apprenticing and then training horses until I went and took... In 1975, I sold everything. I sold my horse, I sold all my gear, and went to do a teacher training, a yoga teacher training that was residential down in Mexico. And for me, that was my last attempt or last jump into life. It was like, if this doesn't work, I'm done. And...
Wow. And so I'm amazed that there was a class that you were able to go to at that time in a town in California. Like, what was that class like? Do you remember it?
I remember it vaguely. It was more, now that I know styles, it was more like in the Shivananda style, like sun exercises and things like that. And it was taught by a woman named Shirley Pepping, who, last I had contact with her, she was working with preemies, premature babies, and saving their lives. So in my time, she was working with adults. Now she's working with the little tiny people.
Wow. All right. So you took this class. You're already in a kind of a bad way at a very early age, it seems like.
Yeah, pretty bad way.
Wow. And so yoga becomes your way out of that?
Yeah. Well, yoga was the first actions that I took that saved my life. And when I went and I did this teacher training course, I had stopped drinking, smoking, doing drugs, and became a vegetarian. That was in 1975. So that was a big turnaround for me. And because this teacher training, it was a residential, so that meant I had a home for a month, and it meant that I'd get fed for a month. So I figured that was going to give me enough time to make a jump. But that's like way back in the dark ages, like I said, that's back in the 70s.
I know, but it's such a... I don't know anybody who had to be looking out for themselves so early on. Like, where were your folks? They weren't around at all?
Oh yeah, they were alive. And when I was doing the horses, I would be in and out of their home, but I wasn't there much. Huh. We didn't get along at all.
All right, so instead of, and that's, as I have to say that I've heard this kind of story a lot, where there's sort of a break point for people where you're either going to like kill yourself or go another way. And that happened for me at a certain point in my life too. And like you said, one of the options is to pursue a study of yoga because it feels like there's the possibility to heal and find a direction or something. And so what was the training that you went to in Mexico? What was that?
It was a residential training at Rancho Rio Caliente, which is a place that had a hot river, and they piped the hot river water into the resort, and you could bathe in it, and had Librium in it, and it was like the most healing waters in probably all of Mexico. It was an amazing place. And I was like, the mountain and the river, it was a big part of my recovery, actually, in that training. I don't remember what was said because I was going through detox from the drugs and the alcohol. So it's like, it was the mountain and the river that was really important to me.
And were the people there aware of that?
Oh, no.
No, you were just kind of getting through it.
Yeah, no, I didn't talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Though it's a funny piece that happened there is I had made one friend there that was another student, and we were sitting in, I think it was her bedroom while she was rummaging around in the closet, and I was sitting on her bed, and I was looking at this little white scorpion crawling between my fingers on my hand. And I had been having withdrawals, like a light form of DTs from all the alcohol. And I just thought it was kind of funny, like I was just having hallucinations again. And this gal turned around and she screamed because she saw this scorpion. And I just thought, what are you doing in my delusion? I think it's a strong sense of what was so-called real and what wasn't at that time, because it was all mixed up. So that was a pretty funny piece. She saw my scorpion.
Yes, the illusion became reality all in a moment.
Yeah. Well, but it was still like I was so into it. It wasn't like I was jumping away like, oh my God, it's a real scorpion. It's like, that's my scorpion, and that's kind of playing around my fingers. And
you see that too? You see that too?
Yeah, I was really surprised.
Wow. Well,
but I wanted to jump forward about 45 years there.
Well, what I would say is it makes sense that you would maybe go into some kind of community like that to remove yourself from your other surroundings and try to find some new kind of center maybe. How long were you in Mexico at that place?
That was a month-long training.
All right. And by the end of the month, how were you doing? Where did you go?
I went to Los Angeles and went to the yoga center, the people that taught that training. Okay. And while they were still in Mexico, I went to the staff knowing that they'd be very burnt out and said, I just came back from the training and I'll be happy to substitute any classes. And so by the time that the owners of the yoga center came back, I had made myself somewhat indispensable.
You made yourself useful. Where was that center? That was in LA, you said?
That was the Center for Yoga in Los Angeles, yeah. And then I taught there for years.
I see. And what was the sort of style or approach back then? It wasn't Forrest Yoga yet, was it?
Oh, no. Ganga White was running that yoga center, and he had a mix of Shivananda, because that was his roots, and then he began studying the Iyengar system, so he brought bits of that in, and then as we progressed, he and I wrote a book together and devised a yoga system together called Double Yoga. That got published around 1980 or 81.
Okay, so that's interesting to me too, because another thing that's been coming a lot when I talk to folks who were studying around that time is how much of like kind of a interweaving of different traditions was happening. Like there's much more camps now, and back then people had all kinds of influences that they were bringing in,
Well, I, for one, was not particularly loyal to any one system. I didn't see any reason to be. You know, if I found an interesting pose that the Iyengar system brought to my attention, or some aspect of it, for example, in the Iyengar system, they were taught with much more attention to alignment than in the Shivananda system. The Shivananda system at that time was pretty sloppy. You know, and the incense and the lights and the weird music and
the knees, chest, chin. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, there's things about it that I didn't like, and things that were really lovely. And the Iyengar system brought to my attention about alignment. And as a horse trainer, and I trained in hunters and jumpers, if the alignment of the horse or the rider is off, you're in trouble. And so alignment made a lot of sense to me. And so that was something I began to really study. But there's a lot of things about that system that didn't resonate and didn't catch me. You know, and so it was, for me, even in the horse world, I was an innovator. I was a creator. I learned how to make do with whatever. You know, I would create different pieces of equipment to help the horses get a bend or a curve or whatever it was that they were needing in order to heal or perform better. I didn't even realize it until I started writing Fierce Medicine. It's like I was working as a healer and as a teacher to the horses way back. So transferring that to humans was one of my next steps. I mean, one of the reasons why I became a teacher, a yoga teacher, one is that it's innate in me. I really want to teach. But two is I had such a deep love and respect for animals. And as a horse trainer, I had a lot of animals brought to me that were quite insane. And the reason why they're insane is because of the viciousness of their owners driving them insane. And I realized that the best thing I could do to help the animals was train the humans into sanity.
Wow.
And that was I made as a teenager. After I decided to not suicide, because I already tried that and it didn't work, and I decided to jump into living. But I also made this decision that if I really wanted to make a difference, I needed to help the humans.
Wow. All right. So you were starting to do that as a yoga teacher at this yoga center in Los Angeles. When does it start to become like more your voice? Like when do you see the very beginnings of Forrest Yoga happening?
Well, after I left that yoga center, that's when there was some crossover. It was like I was doing a lot of the teaching there. And I got to teach part of the teacher trainings there, though Ganga was the main teacher. So it was his philosophies and his thoughts and what was important to him is what he taught. And then when I left there, I started doing more workshops on my own, and then I opened my own yoga center for a while. That was called The Turning Point. And we lost the lease on that building, and that actually came together in a fairly magical way, and I moved up to the Native American reservation in Washington and lived on the reservation for many years after that with a medicine man and learned the medicine ways. So we're living in the wilderness, chop wood, carry water, literally.
So that's like the late 80s that's happening? Yeah,
that was about 1982, I think, that I went up there.
All right, so that's because I know that's something I was going to ask you about later, because it certainly, that seems like an influence in your teaching. So that was the time when you first kind of got initiated or introduced into those kinds of ceremonies and practices, right?
I'm trying to remember the sequence here, because where I first started learning, it was either with Heyoka, that was the person the medicine man that I went up to live with and learned a lot from, like about how to be a pipe keeper, and just learned a lot. He taught a lot. But I also learned a lot from Rosalind Bruyere, who's in California, because I was studying as a healer under her, and she had different sections, different quarters that she would teach. And there was a quarter that she taught called Indian Summer, where she would teach what she learned from the Navajo reservation about the different medicine ways that she had permission to teach. And so I don't really remember in the sequence of my life as like, I believe I was working with Rosalind and then went up. Yes, I'm pretty sure that was the order of it. And then went up onto the reservation into the wilderness.
And how long were you in the reservation?
Until the end of 1988.
Okay, and what prompted you to leave the reservation?
I was done with that relationship, and also there was other things that were pushing on me very hard to go into that I needed for my own healing, which was my own buried memories were coming up to be dealt with around my own abuse. And so I went back to California because there was a therapist there that I felt could help me get through that, and that was Morris Netherton. And then I studied for years with Morris and learned his form of regression therapy.
And was that was effective for you? That helped you deal with some of those traumas?
Yes, it did. But that plus the yoga practice plus the medicine practices. Without the medicine practices, I didn't have... The medicine practices, the Native American practices and ceremonies helped me connect to where my heart and my spirit are. The yoga did not. And that's why I wove ceremony into Forrest Yoga, is because I had to go to the medicine ways, in order to make this deep connection.
But there must be something about the poses, or you just stick to the ceremonies, right?
Right. The poses are many things. They're healers. They're also an exquisite arena to quest. They're ways of releasing the past experiences that are archived in the cell tissue. They're ways of opening the chemicals in the brain and the rest of the body to bring in euphoria and connection to spirit and connection to what we call Wakan Skan, which is the great sacred that moves in all things. I mean, you can really dumb it down and just do the poses to exercise, and you still get benefit from it. But when you choose to work in a way of vision questing, then the poses become a whole nother gateway into another world.
Yeah, the poses themselves are just the arena for the ceremony as well, but you need the combination of both. The background that I come from is the Aboriginal people of Australia, which is the oldest tradition in the world, dating back 40 to 45,000 years. And the reason that the ceremonies vastly changed. When I first met Anna, a lot of the ceremony was the four directions and just drums. But now it's like a musical extravaganza, and it includes all cultures, with the Native American, the Aboriginal, the Maori, we have Bulgarian, Romanian, Gypsy, all sorts of things bring their unique offering that they're from their tradition. And music is the strongest connection there is, even stronger than yoga. Music is the only thing that connects the three parts of the brain. I think yoga actually connects two parts of the brain, but the music and the ceremony, you're connecting the auditory, the visual, and the motor parts of the brain. And we know this in Aboriginal Australia. That's the reason we do ceremony in the first place, to go beyond the ordinary and move into the extraordinary. So all these things that we know, firstly, yoga is not just about coming together for a physical workout. It's coming together as a spiritual gathering of people wanting to make an inquiry and wanting to go deeper. So when I saw Anna's yoga, I thought, okay, she's the first teacher I've seen that I would be willing to to lend this knowledge to this. And up until then, I have to be absolutely frank, to me, like I was in the yoga scene myself. I was doing 2 yoga classes a day. But what was missing was a connection to the sacred. A lot of the yoga that I saw, and especially American teachers, was really cheesy and really irritating and totally diluted and totally unbelievable. And a couple of American teachers came out, and I thought, and I thought yoga could be so fantastic if, because the yoga teacher is like a priest in a church. Sorry about saying it that way. It's sort of, the yoga teacher is the spiritual leader, and we are the disciples. And we have come here not just for a physical workout and a sweat. We're coming here to work out our problems, to feel happier. And when I saw Anna, it was the first time I thought, you know, here's a woman that's down to earth. There's none of the new age bullshit, you know. Love, peace, and brown rice.
I agree. I mean, I recognized that back in the 90s, and I really appreciate what you were saying before. I think it's lovely when we can weave these universal threads through these different traditions, especially sort of, I get why you might feel the importance of filling out the practice, not just with form, but with something beyond. You said like something more extraordinary. I really appreciate that. Yeah. I think, you know, some people are hung up on the idea of like a guru-disciple kind of relationship, but I think the idea that what Anna said, like the idea that you use poses as a vision quest, like that already, it just implies that there's something more to it than just strength and flexibility or working out, that you can get that in other places if you want that, but that practice is potentially about other things.
Another thing Anna and I made a point of is no oms, no Indian chanting, and I don't mean Native American chanting, I mean the regular Indian cliche stuff. And, you know, to me it was like, you know, just unbelievable in most of the instances, all this Indian chanting and not in all cases. Some people do it very well, and some it's sort of an embarrassment. So we made sure that the artistic direction of Forrest Yoga included many cultures, many philosophies, and many different types of music. Like in Sydney, just recently, we had a Sanskrit singer, we had a Bulgarian throat singer, but of course, an Aboriginal.
And a didgeridoo player.
Oh, we always have didgeridoo. That's our main. Didgeridoo is sort of like our main instrument. That's an Aboriginal instrument dating back at least 40,000 years. And didgeridoo means ancestral voice. And actually, didgeridoo is an English word, not an Aboriginal word. The real name is yiggy yiggy. So,
I want to call it yiggy yiggy from now on. That's a much better word.
It is. So I want to track back a little bit to when Jose and I first met. So, like in the yoga world, I've been on my own, like going into this unknown territory, learning how to bring in ceremony and vision quest and healing, you know, and all that stuff. And it just felt like I was alone. And when Jose and I first got together and I started telling him some of my secrets, and one of my secrets was that I would put my hands on my people where they were injured, and I would either do Brahmari or I would sing to them. And I felt like I was like batting around in the mist trying to get him to understand. He just looked at me and said, "My people have been singing into the bones for healing for 40,000 years. And oh boy, we need to talk. Because I was just learning how to do this. And then we started finding all this stuff on internet about when people have done these studies of how music lights up the brain. And we knew already that music goes into parts of the humans that words don't penetrate to. And so we're using all of that very skillfully. And like one of the things that I saw when I first saw Descendants, that's Jose's Aboriginal group, when I first saw them dance, they got my bone marrow dancing, just watching them. But then it was like, but the audience and me being part of the audience is like, then what do you do with that energy? And so I started dreaming on how can I bring this together? You know, and Jose was not interested in that at all at first. And then eventually he brought in some of the dancers for us, and then I would use that exquisite jumped up bone dancing energy and then start teaching people how to navigate through the class and the poses while they could do something instead of just being a passive audience that's wowed and then they go off and get drunk or some other stupid thing. You know, it's like how to use this ancient spiritual technology of the Aboriginal people. You know, like they got this whole explosion of beautiful energy, and then now our people in the class can use that as rocket fuel to go on their quest. And so whether it's Jose's contemporary songs or the other songs that he brings from some of the different cultures, that's part of how we use the music, is how to open up for their quest. And in Shavasana we use it to rearrange the electromagnetic field into a more balanced and into a more balanced way, because around injury and our heart injuries and all that stuff, the energy field gets twisted. And so deliberately using the music in a way to open that up and rebalance.
And in the teacher trainings, I teach the students some traditional healing techniques. Usually in Savasana, there's your traditional adjustments and...
Well, those are my adjustments.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know who made those up. And I just found out Anna made the adjustments.
No, well, I mean, I think... listen, I'm going to jump in for a second because I want to go a little bit back because I really appreciate what you're saying, and it makes a lot of sense to me what you're talking about, and that you took these other influences and kind of moved away from, as you said, sort of the more Indian influences. And, you know, you told us that you left this reservation back in 86. So when you...
88.
In 88. So you leave there in 88. Where do you land? Do you go back to LA, and how is it returning back to the regular world or something after this time on the reservation?
That was really weird.
Yeah.
That's really weird because I had made such deep connections to the earth and the sky and the eagles and the bears, and I mean it was wilderness.
Yeah.
You know, like we had a generator for electricity that needed tending. We had an outhouse. It was, you know, when we wanted to cook, it was frequently using the wood stove to cook and a little tiny propane stove, like a camping stove. And then to go back to where plumbing was no effort at all and there was no air to breathe and no space. But where I needed to work and the person I felt most drawn to work with was Dr. Morris Netherton, because I had this cesspool of nightmare material living inside of me. But I had enough strength inside from the ceremonies, from being in the wilderness. I had connected enough to myself that I could now go into the difficult stuff that made me want to suicide before. So that was a absolutely essential thing. And the reason why I went back to the city is because that's where Morris lived. He lived in Pasadena. But I went back to LA because that was where I thought I could work.
And was that work teaching yoga? Or was it...
Yeah, of course.
So, all right, so you go back to teaching yoga and now working with this... I'm sorry, that name, I don't know, who's this person again that you're doing the work with?
Morris Netherton.
Morris Netherton.
Yeah. He was a regression therapist. And so I also studied and went into his classes and learned how to help people get in and out of their traumatic memories without drowning in them.
And would you say that it's clear now, there's like those are influences. You have the influences from the reservation, you have this regression therapy that you're talking about, you have the other earlier yoga experience that you had. All of these things for me seem to be coming together. I'm trying to get us to when Forrest Yoga, when do you start calling it Forrest Yoga?
I was pretty hesitant about that because this is one of the things I had to unpack with Morris, was I was still in hiding. I hid. But when I put my name up on the wall and in the phone book, as Forrest Yoga Circle. That was when I was calling it Forrest Yoga. So that was 1989, I think, 1990.
That's when you hung the sign up.
I believe so. It's right after I came out of the reservation, and I hooked up with a couple of people that were students from when I was in California before, a married couple that helped me open up Forrest Yoga Circle. They were like the business partners.
And you know what? Your timing was real good, because that was like right as the boom was going to start.
One of them, there's been a number of waves in yoga.
That's true. There's been waves. That's true. That's more accurate. It wasn't just one. But that was when that initial, because I started, maybe it was 93, 94, when I first started like kind of practicing. And I was already teaching by like 95, 96. But I was in New York, which is always funny to me. It's almost like hip hop music, where there was like East Coast, West Coast, and they were happening sort of simultaneously. Sean Korn was one of the people I talked to who went from the East Coast to the West Coast scene.
Yeah.
And you sort of put your flag up over there on the West Coast with the Forrest Yoga Circle, and that's when I sort of showed up at your place a couple years later. And again, I'm curious, like, how soon did you, I guess it makes sense actually that you felt this new confidence to assert yourself, and that's probably where the decisions come from to sort of say that I'd like to do down dog this way, or...
Oh no, that came way before.
Yeah.
Way before. It was like from when I first started doing yoga, I felt some things were really inherently stupid anatomically. There were some really fucking stupid poses in yoga. And people don't develop discernment around it, and they just think like, oh, this is a more advanced pose. It's like, this particular pose twists your knee joints, or it wrecks your neck. It's not a good pose. Just because someone created it or put it in a book doesn't mean it's a good pose. Feel inside for yourself. So there was many things that I felt yoga was lacking. Abdominal strength, for one.
I remember doing heavy ab work with you.
Oh, honey, I have so many more abs now. And Jose has become like Dr. Aboriginal. He loves teaching the abs, so he usually teaches that section when we're doing a yoga ceremony. And he's hysterically funny. You should come work with us again, because it is so rich and gorgeous. It is so gorgeous. I'm so proud of what we're doing. I've been proud of my work for a long time, but together, it's like a synergistic effect. Our work is... I feel like it's changing the very fabric of yoga, and I'm hoping people will follow and choose in whatever way they can express to bring in some of these elements in yoga from here on out into the future.
It's become like an ultimate yoga experience. It's, like I said, it's no longer a class, it's a spiritual gathering of people questing for something sacred, something beyond the neurotic mind.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.